Well, we're getting closer to that warmer weather, and it's time to take a look at your outdoor space, depending on where you are in the country. If it looks like the snow that's falling behind us, you might not want to do that until maybe this weekend. So Sharon Grech from Benjamin Moore and City Line is here this morning.
And inside.
Inside. I was supposed to be out there doing this segment. It would have been perfect, but who knew May 11th it was going to snow?
Hey, Sharon, you know what rhymes with Grech? Deck. Let's talk about it. First things first.
Talk about the decks.
Once the snow stops, we got to clean it. Clean it up.
If you can, once the snow's gone, you can start cleaning. Even if the weather isn't good enough to stain, you want it to be at least 5 degrees for our Arborcoat waterborne stains anyway, so you can get as low as 5 degrees. But you can certainly clean before you get to that stage. So that is really the most important part. And I have a before photo of a project I worked on where the homeowner had a really mildewy deck because it doesn't get a lot of sunlight, and it had been it had just sort of happened over several years. And just by using the cleaning product and, her pressure washer, she got that off.
Oh, wow.
And then we were able to start from scratch. Yeah, so it wasn't as tedious as you might think because the product did a lot of the work itself. And then we stained it with a semi-transparent. So, again, that was actually one of the City Line producers that we did a couple of years ago, and she did all the work herself. So that's your first step. But once you clean it, you want to let it dry for a couple of days. So again, you want to make sure that the weather is cooperating before you get into any staining. But before you even get into any staining, I really, really recommend sanding. And I know it sounds like I'm not going to get down on my hands and knees and sand. That's going to be painful. But if you get one of these handy dandy sanders that you can attach to a pole, it's not that difficult. So you use an 80 grit sandpaper, and what you're doing is you're just taking off the dead layers of wood, because after it gets very wet, it's just definitely the wood, the top layer of the wood is dry, and it'll prevent anything from sticking. So that's kind of
so it's like you're exfoliating it. But what's the motion? Is it like Is there a certain motion?
Yes, you know what, Dina, you want to go with the grain. So you don't want to go against the grain, because then you put too many scratches into the wood. But you want to go like with the grain, following the grain. And it doesn't have to be really excessive. If you've got peeling paint or stain on your deck and you need to actually remove that, there is another product for that is kind of more like it's a remover. So the same process where you brush it, roll it on, and then let it sit for a bit, wash it off. And then again, same thing though, you'd want to sand before you get into the staining.
And Sharon, would that sanding spot help out with leveling it as well? Because when people get the deck and it starts to kind of warp a little bit and things like that?
You know what? If you have just some imperfections because of the way that it's leveled, if it's majorly warped, then you'd probably need like a really heavy-duty sander, like you'd need to rent one, which we have done for some projects because it's just too big of a deck and nobody wants to get out there and use their pole sander. So yeah, it definitely can level. Now, when you have that kind of situation, usually you might end up having to repair some boards. So you might have some new wood, some old wood, and that's actually a really good position where you'd want to use a solid stain. Because when you have those different types of wood, it can look really like a patchwork quilt out there. Right. So you can get into something that's more solid. It's not paint, so it's still a stain. And you can't see it, I'm sure, on screen here, but you can still feel the texture and slightly see the texture of the wood. But that's a really good time to use a solid stain when you're trying to make everything look consistent. Whereas when you have really good wood and you just want to add a little bit of color, you can use something like this semi-transparent stain. And it comes in a variety of colors, like wood colors, and then there's some really pretty blues and greens that work outside in nature. But then one of the most popular ones, again, if you have wood that's in really good shape, is the translucent stain. And this comes in a natural, this is a cedar tone, so it's got just a hint. It's just like a hint of what do you call those foundations that have a little bit of color, like a bronzer? So it's kind of like that for your makeup. Yeah. So you want to use that when you've got really great wood, and then you can put a clear coat on that just adds extra protection. So choosing colors for your deck can be just as tricky as choosing colors for your interior walls. So I really highly recommend getting a sample. There's probably some spot in the deck that maybe is going to be covered with furniture or something, so you can just sort of test it out over there. And then you can always sand it off anyway if you want to, if you don't have an area that's going to be hidden. So you want to test out those stains and those opacities to make sure you've got the right one. Another thing I'm going to quickly mention is that you can stain engineered wood. Now, you don't want to generally because it's maintenance free and that's why you buy it. But I did work on a project last year where the owner bought the house. They had a 20-year-old engineered deck. It was great, but it was this reddy brown color that he really didn't like because he was changing everything to be modern and gray. So rather than, tear the whole thing down and end up in the landfill, we stained it with Arbor Coat solid stain. So again, the most important thing with that is really cleaning it. Again, with the cleaning products or with trisodium phosphate, heavy-duty scrub brush. to really clean off any mold and mildew, because that's what's going to prevent the paint or stain from sticking. So just kind of wanted to mention that. One other thing, though, back to the wood, it's really important when you are applying the stain. And again, you got to wait a good 48 hours for it to be dry. I love using a stain brush. And again, it seems really tedious, but you can attach it to a pole. If you're working with somebody else, you could always get somebody to do, and now that we're all home, you probably have someone who can help. If somebody rolls the stain on with the semi-transparent and the translucent, you can just back brush. Okay, so you're kind of rolling the product on, and then you have that other person brushing, again, with the grain. Don't go against the grain. Yeah, because you want to push it into the stain, because again, it's not like, push it into the wood so that it penetrates. And one other quick flooring that a lot of us have, whether it's a patio, a porch, or maybe even a balcony. I've helped people with lots of balcony projects. You can take that boring gray concrete and paint it. Oh, cool. You can stencil it. You can do something fun so it looks like tile. So again, you want to make sure it's really clean. If it has a previous coat on it, you want to loosen it with a wire brush, get rid of all the loose paint. If there is anything already on it, clean it really well with trisodium phosphate. And then we have a latex floor and patio paint that can now be tinted to any color. So if you want a fuchsia pink or raspberry truffle patio, you can. I chose something a little less crazy. I've got Van Dusen blue, and you just want to roll that on. If I was doing this in reality, I would use a nice big roller, a good 20-millimeter pile so you can get enough of the product on. But these are pretty smooth. Like the concrete's not too rough, so you don't need to get into the really heavy pile. But again, then it's just a matter of painting it on just like you would anything else. If it's really raw, porous concrete, you can use this thinned out your first coat so it kind of acts as a primer, and then do the second coat full power, full strength.
Decking out your deck. Thanks for sharing those tips. We've got to roll on into a commercial break. No more puns. I'm done. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you so much.